the polls have not tightened all that much. Biden is still ahead in a number of key states, except for Iowa. He still has a substantial lead on President Trump, and we've seen more of what we've come to expect from both candidates in the past week. Another disastrous interview from the president where he was called on some of the claims he's made about his ability to manage coronavirus, and another gaffe from would-be President Biden, Vice President Biden, where he's forgotten his lines, forgotten to be able to deliver the line right at the point where he was trying to prove the point that he had better mental cognition than President Trump. What we have also seen is a huge amount of money raised by both parties in the month. Today, we got the figures back, $140 million raised by the Democrats, $165 million raised by the Republicans in the Trump re-election campaign, most of which will be spent on advertising in the coming months.
Now, when we talk about these interviews, I'm intrigued by this, James, because while he's been criticised understandably for the performance in the interview and so on, I just get the sense that, you know, it's such a polarised political discourse and polarised nation right now that every interview, whether it's a stumble, you know, or his, you know, questioning the facts being put to him by the interviewer, I just think it resonates very differently in different parts of that country, i.e. his base would have loved a lot of that interview.
Look, for that base, they're not going to be put off by the fact that a journalist threw some figures back in the face of the president. I mean, Jonathan Swan's gotten closer, I think, to this White House than any other reporter in Washington. He's trusted by them and he gets the scoop on a lot of stuff coming out of that administration. But Trump's base aren't going to be swayed by this interview. For him, he still represents authenticity. He still represents the anti-socialist leader, the anti-identity politics leader, someone who's authentically concerned with their economic welfare, willing to put them first ahead of the rest of the world. So nothing in that interview will have changed that view. I think where they might start to worry about the president's abilities is on his handling of the coronavirus, because there are some pretty objective facts there that the president isn't able to as easily dismiss. And there are some pretty credible figures, whether it's Dr. Fauci or others, continuing to really show up the president's handling of this crisis. And that's where we'll see the Biden campaign spend most of the money. The issue they're going to campaign on the most in the next month or so is this issue of how Trump has handled the coronavirus pandemic.
I've got to say, from time to time, you look at Joe Biden, his own approach, it doesn't instill people with a great deal of confidence, I wouldn't have thought, if you're a Democratic supporter.
No, he's stumbling over his words. He's forgetting where he is. He's forgetting what he's trying to say. He looks old, and the idea of him, President 81, of course, you know, we've had presidents, Reagan was criticised for being too old when he came into office, and went on to do a great job, but this is different. Biden is struggling on this campaign. He's not projecting energy, and he needs to. He's still got 100 days to go. So that's what makes his choice of vice president, which we're expecting sometime in the next week and a half, such a critical decision for him and his campaign. He's really got to inject some energy, use that appointment to bring together all the different parts of his party and get this campaign some momentum.
The suggestion that it's all over, I think, is way too premature, particularly when you look at some of these national polls starting to tighten over the last few days. Trump obviously has had a lot of problems with the coronavirus pandemic, James, but do you agree that it's too early to be getting confident on the Democratic side of things?
Absolutely. I mean, there are just so many variables in this campaign, so many things that are different as well. I mean, we're not going to see traditional campaign conventions from either side. Both of them are doing it remotely. Biden will accept the nomination remotely. The Republican convention will be a closed convention. It'll be much more controlled than it has been in the past. So that feature of the campaign won't be normal. I mean, everybody usually waits for the October surprise. Who knows how many surprises we'll get between now and October, let alone before the election day. And then there's the technical questions around how many Americans are going to vote. By some projections, up to 80 million Americans could be voting early through mail-in ballots, which of course we know are a controversial issue and one very much on the president's mind. So that means that, you know, they might be voting weeks out from election day. So the issues in the last couple of weeks, the debates, they may not matter as much. People may have made up their minds and voted early.
And then finally, James, before I let you go, the other question is Donald Trump's response to the result. I know we were talking about this in 2016. What if Donald Trump didn't accept the result? But the fact is he won that, and he could well win this one too.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he was asked the question whether he would accept the result. He said, well, he wasn't going to commit to that. He'd wait and see. I mean, if you think about how the president phrases things, that's a fairly reasonable response for him. But the thing is, if President Trump loses, he will need to comport himself with a degree of grace and dignity so that it doesn't further rupture a nation that is pretty ruptured at the moment. And grace and dignity have not been the strengths of this president. For all his other strengths, grace and dignity have not been his traditional strengths. So really how he comports himself, whether he wins or loses, will really set the tone for what the next 4 years in America looks like.
It sure will. James Brown, we'll talk a lot over the next 3 months. Thank you.